Hey. All right. So now you guys can hear me. Whoo, boy. I don't know why I said it like that. I don't know why she swallowed that fly. I guess she'll die. All right. Chapter 28. Therese. Whatever was happening out there was not happening to the two of them. Wait. Whatever was happening outside was not happening to the two of them. Through the huge lens of glass spinning between the window and the conflagration, she could see Ayanna and Grundle charging the bridge, could see Stargazer and his army charging from the other side, could see the old man's chariot sweeping down to meet him, but she could see no way for them to win. Port, what are you going to do? He's going to kill them. Portillion tipped up his glasses and gave her a warm look. Therese, he's not going to kill them. Don't you understand? He doesn't have to. He doesn't want to. Think open. She looked down. The image showed a sad figure lifting human shapes from the earth like marionettes. The captain read, "Wishes can make people, but they can't make friends." Her eyes widened. She touched his arm, her words caught in her throat. Then the villagers, he laughed. They aren't enough. They aren't real. Of course he wanted us to come into the village. He needs us. He has no one else. She looked out to see the fight expanding into ever crazier flights of fancy. Then he won't kill them? Portillion smiled. No. He raced towards the stairs. Come on, we have to tell them. She stared in confusion as he bounded down the steps. Come on! Yeah, so Portillion thinks the guy just wants to be friends. That's fun. It's time to reload. It's time to reload. It's time to reload the bong. Oh, it's time to reload. Yeah, it's time to reload. Yes, it's time to reload. Chapter 29. The battle had taken them to the sky. Below, Martok and his men were battling phantoms, skeletons, zombies, succubi, gorgeous burgundy-skinned women with huge tits and snakes where their pubic hair should have been. It was a Chazir damn disaster. For his part, he'd slashed the wizard only to find his blade stuck as if in concrete, lifted skyward as the old bastard gripped the edge of the chariot with a massive lifted skyward as the old bastard gripped the edge of the chariot with a massive clawed hand. As the thing wheeled around to face the soldiers, he caught a glimpse of his sister and her guardian bounding onto the bridge. Meanwhile, the giant lens was directing Portillian's magical blasts up and into the wizard's body. Throom, throom, throomp. The heat from the blasts was intense. Reynold climbed up his sword and over the man's back, giving up the gauntlet and kicking his mailed legs up over the side. The little henchman was there, frantically manning the controls. He was whipping his balding head around in desperate jerking motions. Reynold grabbed him by the back of his collar and yanked him hard across the floor. As the whelp hit the low wall, he looked at Reynold, his eyes wide and bleary with a heart-rending sadness. Reynold was in the midst of drawing his knife when he faltered. "This is no monster. He's barely a man." It's weird, huh? It's a strange development. We've got wish people and a sad young man. Chapter 30. Grundle. It was infuriating. The wizard had taken to the sky on a damnable floating chariot, leaving Grundle and Aeana fixed to the earth. Grundle's shield pulsed, his power gauntlet surging with offensive energy, trapped on the ground with no way to access its target. Across the canal, Captain Stargazer's men were in a pitched battle with imaginary monsters. He wondered if they were actually in real danger. "Best not to think about it. Protect Aeana. That's my mission." He looked back and saw her pointing into the water. He nodded and prepared to jump. At the last second, he felt her land on his back, wrapping her muscular arms around his neck. He directed the shield to pierce the water and broke into a run. With a short hop, they were airborne. He heard Aeana gasp in a big breath, and then they were below. Fish raced in all directions, apparently shocked to see a giant man surrounded by steaming invisible energy blast crashing down from above. That's a weird meter. Let me try that again. Fish raced in all directions, apparently shocked to see a giant man surrounded by steaming invisible energy blast crashing down from above. He saw it, its handle sticking up out of the mud. It was glowing faintly with green energy, the only thing left of the goddess with any power in this weird place. He snatched it out of the muck and let it float back to Ayana. Then they were climbing. As they crested the surface, the shield broke through the crumbling remains of the bridge, sending beams and splinters flying in all directions. Grundle gripped a pylon and rolled, allowing Ayana to push off towards the village side shore. Grundle, let me help you. Ayana was reaching out, holding the hammer with both hands. He shrugged her off, waving past her towards a charging skeletal warrior, its hand axe raised high above its helmeted head. Ayana spun around just in time to catch the axe in the center of her face. Grundle's scream was so loud, the cavern shook for what seemed like hours. Stalactites and boulders rained down upon the battlefield like a sea of arrows. He lost his strength. He felt his muscles give out. He was drowning. He would surely not survive. This was it. The end of everything. He had failed. That's heavy stuff. Ayana just took one to the face. That can't be good. Chapter 31. Martok. Martok felt the bridge shatter as his enormous blade crashed down. The wizard's eyes went wide. He clutched frantically at the railing to keep from falling. Behind Martok, the man screamed, surrounded by a throng of bizarre alien creatures. Undead warriors, shambling half-clothed bodies with red eyes, voluptuous instinct. He had to act without desire. He yanked his axe free from the slats and bounded onto the bridge. The wizard was already flying, attached to the magical chariot and rising rapidly out of reach. Martok had one shot. He wheeled around in an insane turn and launched the giant axe high into the air. It crashed into the side of the chariot, sending the wizard down screaming into the canal. With a splash, the water around him burned up in an enormous cloud of steam. Martok bellowed with rage. Reaching back over his shoulder to block an attacking skeleton's swing, he yanked away the sword and dipped his back long enough to turn, kneel, and hurl the mindless beast halfway across the canal. It made a nasty thunk as its skull crashed onto a broken hunk of bridge. Now he had a sword. He took a few steps back, then jumped, diving into the water to slay the murderous wizard. As he broke the surface, his eyes went wide. The wizard's cloak was floating halfway down, empty, and jetting out from the opening was a massive swarm of fish, little tiny fuckers with deadly rows of razor-sharp teeth. Martok wailed and thrashed to no avail. As he sank to the base of the canal, he felt his skin tear away, felt his eyeballs pop. screamed breathlessly as his testicles were yanked from his scrotum. No amount of armor could save him. He thought of his wife, his children. I wish I'd done more. I could have done so much. Is this all there is? Chapter 32. Aeana. They'd survived the first moments of the battle, but the wizard had outsmarted them. Above the ground, the glass lens was firing massive balls of energy into the wizard's body to minimal effect. Grundle had slowed down, apparently confused. Aeana grabbed his arm and rushed toward the remnant of the bridge. Blessed Mother, it's not safe, Grundle cried out as she passed. And yet the goddess demands it. She raced through his shield and onto the steps, catapulting herself onto the slats of the bridge. Grundle grunted, following close behind. Ahead, Martok and her brother were battling an army of ghastly creatures. The most disturbing of them were the succubi, ridiculously proportioned, red-skinned horrors that wrapped up their victims and choked them to death while crushing the poor men's pelvises between their meaty thighs. It was a disaster. They were fighting an enemy that used their own desires against them, an enemy without a face, with no obvious reason for attacking. She raced across the bridge as fast as she could, leapt across the broken section and down to the grass, feeling a nasty jolt as her shoulder cracked against the earth. The pain was intense. She would put it to good use. Grundle, we must protect the men! She ran into the scrum, yanked a sword from a dying soldier, and swung it into the back of one of the ghastly horrors. She knew it was illusory, but couldn't help being surprised by its weight. The creature's dead flesh felt so real beneath her swinging blade. The creature's dead flesh felt so real beneath her swinging blade. The battle raged on. Above them, the wizard had unfurled huge sections of colorful cloth or paper, transforming the simple flying chariot into a gigantic swirling dragon. Fireballs rained from its jaws, blessedly snuffed out by Portillian's magic before it could reach their position on the ground. How long can his power last? She wondered as she waded into the army of the dead. Grundle screamed. She spun around just in time to see a succubus's claws rip into his skull. 3 more had climbed onto his back, and a 5th was gnawing and ripping at his wrist, presumably trying to remove his gauntlet. Another scream, and she saw her brother hurtling down to the earth. He'd been thrown loose by the flying beast. With a sickening crunch, he landed amidst the crowd of soldiers. Spinning her head from one horror to the next, the truth fell upon her, much like the succubi had fallen upon her dear friend. It's over. We've lost. My goddess, how I've failed you. She fell to her knees, gasping for air. As Grundle collapsed behind her, she spun her head. She gasped again, stricken with horror at what she was seeing. A skeleton chomping greedily on one of Grundle's soft brown eyes. Another was digging bits of his brain out through the socket. No, Grundle, no. Goddess, how can this be? How can this be? The axe crushed her spine, leaving her alive but unable to move. With the next strike, it was over. All right, last one. Chapter 33. Reynold. Stay back! Reynold aimed his blade at the whimpering henchman and focused his attention on the controls. They were inscrutable. No buttons, no dials, not the merest hint of a joystick. He yanked it in all directions to no effect. He glared back at the weakling. Damn it, man! You've lost! Tell me how to stop this thing, and let's put an end to this! The henchman did not move. He was frozen in place. Reynold was furious. He seriously considered stabbing the idiot just out of anger. Below, he could hear the clang and crash of sword and shield, could hear the anguished cries of dying men. He was apoplectic. Do it, goddess, damn you! Don't make me murder you! He swung the blade back and up. One more gambit intended to scare the man into action. The sword left his hand. It was airborne, held aloft by some invisible force. The cursed wizard floated into view, smiling like a damn fool. Wizard, tell your men to put us down. This fight is over. The wizard leveled a look at him that infuriated him. It reminded him of Mother whenever he expressed it as if he were saying, We both know you won't do anything of the sort, Ray Ray. He remembered how the fury would rise, how he would want to lash out, and what it felt like to stuff those feelings deep inside for fear of inciting her terrifying wrath. The wizard wiggled. The wizard wiggled his fingers. Reynold's throat seized up. His chest was on fire. His muscles began to fire at random intervals, making his back stiffen and bend in a horribly undignified way. He voided his bladder. The contents of his bowels filled his uniform. He was shamed beyond all imagining. And then the creature was wearing her face. The diabolical woman, ruler of House Ferrule. He tried to attack her, but it was useless. She chuckled at his impotence. And then he was flying, falling, over the side and down to the ground. I'm sorry, sister. I have failed you once again. And for the last time. So that is this fight. Everybody's dead. Oh, it's pretty wild, huh? How do you feel? I feel good. You know what to do. Rate, review, subscribe, send me an email, blah, blah, blah. Twitter at EIA podcast. Come back soon, you hear?